They called security on her while she was ordering tea. No shouting, no aggression. Just the audacity of being a calm, well-dressed black woman sitting alone in the lobby of the luxury hotel she owned. She didn't even flinch when the manager pointed at her. She just watched. Watched as the guards approached like she was some kind of threat. Watched as they demanded she leave before things escalate. Watched the white guest glance, then look away. And she smiled, because 5 minutes later, they would all be gone. If you're tired of injustice, of people being judged before they even speak, click that subscribe button. Drop a comment. Justice has a name, because stories like this, they don't just entertain, they remind us who we are. Sharon Wells was 42, soft-spoken, a chemical engineer turned real estate mogul. She owned 5 hotels across the East Coast, and this one, the Rosegate Grand in Atlanta, was her crown jewel. But none of that mattered when her skin walked in first. It was a Monday. She arrived unannounced, her usual style. She liked to see how her team ran things when they thought she wasn't watching. A simple navy dress. No glam. Just presence. She took a seat in the lobby near the indoor fountain, pulled out her notebook, and began reviewing quarterly reports. Within minutes, the concierge whispered to the manager, a woman who didn't recognize her boss. A woman who saw skin, not story. Then came the security guards. Ma'am, we've had complaints. We'll need to ask you to leave if you're not a guest here. Sharon looked up slowly. Complaints from whom? That's confidential, ma'am. I see, she replied. And if I refuse? The taller guard shifted. Then we'll escort you out. There was no fight, no shouting, just a deep breath. She stood, gathered her things, and as she passed the front desk, she whispered just loud enough, call a staff meeting in 5 minutes, and tell them Sharon Wells is here. The color drained from the manager's face. By the time Sharon walked into the conference room, her assistant had already arrived, knowing the drill. A second later, the entire management staff filed in, concierge, waitstaff, security, and that same manager, now sweating. She didn't yell. She placed her phone on the table, hit record, and one by one, she let them explain why they thought a black woman sitting in her own lobby could only be a problem. The manager stammered. I didn't know who you were. Sharon nodded. But you assumed who I wasn't. One by one, they made excuses. Some cried. Some stayed silent. One apologized. The others didn't get the chance. I built this place for people like me to feel safe, respected, and welcome, she said. If I can't get that in my own house, then you shouldn't be in it either. She didn't fire one or two. She fired everyone in that room. By sunset, a new team was being flown in from her D.C. property. By sunrise, the Rosegate Grand had a new heartbeat. But this wasn't the beginning of Sharon's story. It was just the middle. You see, Sharon had grown up in the Deep South during the 1960s, where racism didn't wear a name tag. It wore a sheriff's badge. Her father was a carpenter who never looked a white man in the eye, and her mother worked 3 jobs to feed 5 kids. Sharon was the one who read every book twice, who fixed broken machines and rewired the house before age 12. At 19, she earned a full scholarship to MIT. At 25, she was the only black woman chemical engineer in her firm. At 30, she walked away from it all to build something of her own. By 42, she had a real estate empire, but power didn't erase perception. It didn't matter that her name was on every deed, every payroll. In the eyes of people like that manager, she still didn't belong. So she made sure to own the spaces they tried to lock her out of. And what no one in that room knew, Sharon had a daughter, a little girl watching from the doorway that day, eyes wide, silent, taking notes not in a notebook, but in her soul. Her name was Ava. And this was the day her fire was lit. They say daughters carry their mother's dreams like hidden fire. But Ava Wells didn't just carry it. She lit the world with it. It was a chilly November morning in Manhattan. The city was buzzing with the usual energy, horns, hurried footsteps, steaming cups, and skyscrapers waking up in the clouds. But inside the velvet-draped ballroom of the Marigold Crown Hotel, things were off. Ava stood at the rear entrance of the hotel. She wore a crisp black pantsuit, no jewelry, just one red enamel pin on her lapel, a rose. Her hair was natural, coiled, proud. In her hand, a leather-bound folder. In her eyes, her mother's legacy. She owned this hotel, quietly, anonymously, through a holding company she formed when she was only 28. But no one here knew that. Not the manager, not the security guards, not the two executives hosting a brunch upstairs to celebrate their record-breaking quarterly profits. That was intentional, because Ava had come not to observe, but to test. She walked in through the lobby and headed straight to the executive lounge. She didn't ask for permission, didn't need to. The hotel was hers. But within seconds, 2 staff members stopped her. "Miss, I'm sorry. This is for VIP guests only," one said with the usual polite smile that didn't reach the eyes. "I'm aware," Ava replied. "Then you'll understand if I ask you to leave?" "I'd like to speak to the manager," Ava said, calm and steady. The other worker narrowed her eyes. "Are you with the band? Or catering?" Ava chuckled. "No, but I do like good music and food." The manager arrived shortly. A pale man with thinning hair and fake confidence. He looked her up and down with the subtle arrogance of a man used to being in charge and never challenged. "Is there a problem here?" "I was just telling your team that I'd like to speak to someone in charge," Ava said. "Well, that would be me," he smirked. "And I'm afraid we don't allow guests to loiter in this area." Ava nodded slowly. "Loiter?" "Yes, ma'am. Unless you have a room booked or are part of the event upstairs. I'll have to ask you to step out." "Step out," she repeated softly. "Yes." Ava smiled, not because it was funny, but because it was familiar. 37 years earlier, her mother had heard those same words, in her own hotel, from people who saw only skin, not legacy, not ownership, not power. She reached into her folder and pulled out a document, slid across the front desk toward the manager. "Before you finish your sentence, you might want to read this." He looked down, eyes scanning the paper. It was a copy of the deed, and at the bottom, the signature read, "Avier Sharon Wells, sole proprietor, Marigold Crown Holdings." The smirk vanished. Silence fell like a drop glass. "I'm not a guest," Ava said. "I'm your employer." The 2 staff members froze. The manager blinked. "I didn't know." "No, you didn't ask. You just assumed." He started to speak again, but Ava held up a hand. "Let me tell you what I do know. I know your executive lounge hasn't been cleaned properly in 2 weeks. I know your staff meeting reports have been falsified, and I know you've turned away at least 14 people this year based on vibe checks." "How?" "I don't just read reports. I live them." Within minutes, Ava called for an emergency all-staff meeting. The ballroom emptied. Confused murmurs filled the air. Cameras were disabled, phones silenced. And when the door shut behind her, Ava stepped onto the stage like a woman on a mission. She looked across the sea of faces, white, black, brown, all shades, all status. And then she said what her mother once said in that Atlanta hotel decades before. "I built this place so people like me, like you, could walk in and feel like they belong." Her voice didn't tremble. It thundered. "But if the people who work here don't carry that spirit, then you shouldn't be here either." She dismissed the manager, his access revoked. A new leadership team, one trained, diverse, and deeply vetted, was already waiting in the wings. But Ava didn't stop there. She announced a full audit of all hiring and guest interaction logs. She doubled training budgets. And she restructured promotions to prioritize cultural intelligence and respect, not just resumes. Her speech ended in quiet applause that grew into a standing ovation, not because she demanded it, but because they saw in her something rare, a leader who had lived the pain. After the meeting, a young black intern named Jordan approached her. "I heard about your mother," he said. "I think about quitting sometimes. But after the day?" He paused, tears welling. "I think I'll stay." Ava smiled, placed a hand on his shoulder, and said, "That's what they don't expect us to do. Stay, rise, and own it anyway." Sharon's fire burned in Ava's veins. But Ava didn't just carry her mother's legacy. She expanded it. From Atlanta to Manhattan, from silence to systems, from being kicked out her own hotel, to building one that welcomed everyone. If this story lit a fire in you, don't scroll away. Smash that subscribe button, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and drop a comment. Legacy isn't given, it's built. Because we don't just tell stories, we remind the world who's really in charge.